Your 40s have a way of making everything feel more real, don't they? One day you're telling yourself you've still got plenty of time to get serious about money, and the next you're comparing pension balances, wondering why a routine trip to the supermarket now feels like a luxury experience, and realizing that retirement is no longer some distant problem for future you to deal with. Your knees make strange noises. You get irrationally excited about a discount on olive oil, and somehow, financial stability starts sounding a lot more attractive than living your best life. But here's the plot twist nobody really tells you. Your 40s can be one of the most powerful decades for building wealth. Not because you suddenly become a different person, not because you need to double your salary overnight, and not because you've got to become one of those people who tracks every penny in a color-coded spreadsheet and treats fun like a suspicious expense. Your 40s matter because this is often the decade when money starts becoming more responsive to smart decisions. If you built decent habits in your 30s, this is where they can compound. And if you didn't, this is still one of the last decades where meaningful course correction can make a massive difference. So if you're looking at your finances thinking, I really should be further along by now, don't panic. Shame is not a strategy. Clarity is. My name is Dan, and I spend way too much time thinking about how regular people can build extraordinary financial security without turning their lives into a punishment. If you're tired of feeling like you're doing your best with money and still somehow not getting enough traction, stick with me because this is the decade where the right milestones matter more than ever. Because that's what your 40s are really about. Not looking rich, not pretending you've got it all figured out, not hitting random round numbers just so you can feel temporarily superior to a retirement calculator. Your 40s are about building a life that becomes harder to destabilize. And there are a few major money milestones that make that possible. When most people think about financial milestones, they usually imagine a handful of flashy goals. Make six figures, buy a house, hit 1 million in net worth, pay off the mortgage, retire early. And sure, those can all matter, but the most important money milestones in your 40s are not just about status. They are about function. They change what your money can do for you. They change how much stress your life can absorb. They change how quickly you recover from setbacks. They change whether one bad month becomes a nuisance or a full-blown crisis. They change whether your future feels like something you're building or something you're hoping works out. That is the real lens for this decade, because by the time you hit your 40s, money stops being mostly about potential and starts being a lot more about structure. What have you built? What is actually in place? What can your finances handle? How much pressure can your life absorb without falling apart? That is why these milestones matter so much. Let's start with the first one because everything else gets easier once this is in place. Milestone 1. A real emergency fund. By your 40s, you want to be done with the phase where every unexpected expense feels like a personal attack from the universe. The car needs repairs. The boiler dies. A pet gets sick. A child needs something expensive at exactly the wrong time. Work gets shaky. Life does what life always does and throws some weird, inconvenient nonsense into your week. At this stage, your response should not be financial panic. That means having a proper emergency fund, not a vague intention to save one, not a credit card with a little room left on it, not the idea that you'll just figure it out, a real cash buffer. For most people, that means at least 3 to 6 months of essential expenses set aside somewhere safe and accessible. And if your income is irregular, your industry feels unstable, or multiple people depend on you, the number may need to be even higher. Now, this is not the sexiest milestone in the world. Nobody throws a party because they finally built 6 months of boring cash reserves. Nobody posts glamorous content about the thrill of having enough money set aside to survive a roof leak and an appliance replacement in the same quarter. But this milestone is huge because it marks the difference between being financially responsible and being financially resilient. Those are not the same thing. Responsible people pay their bills. Resilient people can survive disruption without going into chaos. And in your 40s, resilience matters a lot more. Because this decade usually comes with more complexity. Bigger bills, more obligations, higher expectations, children, partners, mortgages, aging parents, or careers that pay better but also leave less room for mistakes. A financial hit at 24 is unpleasant. A financial hit at 44 can trigger a chain reaction. That's why this milestone matters so much. Once you have a real emergency fund, your whole life changes in ways that don't always show up dramatically on paper. You make better decisions. You panic less. You don't turn every setback into debt. You buy time. And time is one of the most valuable things money can buy. A solid emergency fund doesn't make you wealthy. It makes you harder to knock over. That is a fantastic place to be in your 40s. Milestone 2. Investing is no longer casual. In your 20s, investing anything at all puts you ahead of a lot of people. In your 30s, consistency becomes the big win. But in your 40s, investing needs to become structurally important. This is the decade where you want to stop thinking of investing as something you do when there's some extra money left over and start treating it like a fixed part of how your life operates. Because if retirement has been a nice abstract idea up to this point, your 40s are when it starts becoming a math problem. Not in a scary way, in a real way. You still have enough time for compounding to work in your favor, but you no longer have so much time that tiny, half-hearted contributions can be excused forever. A major money milestone in your 40s is reaching the point where your investing is automatic, consistent, intentional, and meaningful enough to move the needle. That means knowing your contribution rate, knowing where the money is going, knowing roughly what it's meant to accomplish, and increasing contributions when your income rises instead of letting lifestyle creep eat every improvement. This is where many people either create real financial momentum or start realizing they've spent too many years confusing good intentions with progress. Because intentions do not compound, systems do. You want the kind of setup where investing keeps happening even when work is busy, motivation is low, or the market is being dramatic, especially then. And this milestone matters because in your 40s, your investments should start becoming emotionally visible. Not necessarily life-changing yet, but visible. The balance should begin to feel like an asset base, not just a pile of contributions. You should start seeing years where growth gets your attention. You should start feeling the psychological shift where your money is not just sitting there, it's beginning to participate. That changes everything. Once your investments start showing meaningful signs of life, discipline gets easier. You are no longer running entirely on faith. You finally have evidence that the machine is starting to work. Milestone 3. Toxic debt is on its way out. By your 40s, high-interest debt should feel less like a normal part of adult life and more like something that needs to be removed as quickly as possible. Now, let's be sensible here. Not all debt is automatically bad. A manageable mortgage on a sensible property is one thing. Low-interest borrowing tied to a clear plan can be one thing. But long-running credit card debt, personal loans used to fund lifestyle inflation, or constant financing of things you don't actually need, that's different. That is the kind of debt that quietly eats your future. And your 40s are too important a decade to keep feeding it, because every pound or dollar going to high-interest debt is money that cannot be used to build assets, reduce stress, or create options. Every month you stay stuck in expensive debt, your future has to work harder to repair the damage. That is especially painful in your 40s, because this should be one of your strongest wealth-building decades. You want your income going toward investments, cash reserves, equity, retirement, freedom, not disappearing into interest charges because your past spending is still demanding tribute. One of the biggest emotional upgrades in adult financial life is getting rid of toxic debt. It doesn't always feel glamorous. In fact, the moment itself can feel strangely quiet. There isn't always fireworks. Sometimes it's just the absence of that low-grade stress that's been humming in the background of your life for years. You stop feeling behind before the month even starts. You stop treating the minimum payment like some annoying but permanent roommate. You stop leaking financial energy. That quiet matters. A lot of financial progress doesn't feel exciting. It feels cleaner, lighter, less noisy. And in your 40s, less noise is a major win. Milestone 4. You know your net worth. A surprising number of adults hit their 40s without a clear idea of what they actually own, what they owe, and whether they are truly progressing. They know their salary. They know their monthly bills. They might know roughly what's in their pension or savings account, but they don't actually know their net worth. That needs to change. One of the major money milestones of your 40s is simply this: you know your number and you track the direction it's moving. Not obsessively, not as a personality trait, not because you need to compare yourself to strangers on the internet who somehow became millionaires at 27 while also apparently having time for sunrise yoga and homemade sourdough. You track it because it tells the truth. Net worth captures the bigger picture: cash, investments, retirement accounts, property equity, business value, and debt. It tells you whether your overall financial life is becoming stronger or just busier. And in your 40s, that distinction matters. Because this is the decade where multiple financial forces should start stacking in your favor. Your retirement accounts may be growing, your mortgage may be shrinking, your cash reserves may be improving, your income may be near its peak, your debt should be getting more manageable, your investments should be gaining scale. If those things are happening, your net worth trend should start showing it. And if it isn't, that tells you something useful. Maybe spending has quietly risen too fast. Maybe debt is holding you back. Maybe your assets are too conservative or too scattered. Maybe every pay rise you've received has been absorbed by a more expensive lifestyle instead of building real wealth. This is why net worth matters. It turns vague optimism into measurable reality. And by your 40s, reality is your friend. You don't need motivational slogans. You need feedback. Milestone 5. Retirement is a plan, not a wish. This is where the conversation starts getting more serious. In your 40s, retirement should stop being a fuzzy concept you vaguely intend to handle later. It should become something you can actually describe. That doesn't mean you need the perfect number down to the last decimal place. It doesn't mean everything must be solved immediately. And it definitely doesn't mean you need to panic if you're not where you hope to be. But it does mean you should know 4 things: roughly how much you may need, roughly how much you already have, how much you're contributing, and whether the current trajectory makes sense. This milestone matters because your 40s are still an incredibly valuable decade for course correction. You still have time. You still have earning power. You still have room for compounding to help you. But the window is not infinite anymore. That is why clarity matters so much now. A lot of people get themselves into trouble not because they are reckless, but because they are avoidant. They don't want to check. They don't want to do the math. They don't want to find out the gap is larger than they hoped. So they postpone. And postponement has a cost. One of the most powerful money milestones in your 40s is moving from financial avoidance to financial engagement. You stop saying, "I should probably look into that." You actually look, you estimate, you adjust, you raise contributions if needed. You get honest about what later life might require. Because retirement planning is not really about old age. It's about future freedom. It's about whether later life becomes a period of choice or a period of financial dependence and stress. And your 40s are one of the best times to influence that outcome. Milestone 6. You protect what you've built. By your 40s, building wealth is not enough on its own. You also need to protect it. This is one of the least glamorous milestones in the entire decade, which is exactly why people neglect it. Insurance, income protection, beneficiaries, basic estate planning, a will. Understanding what happens if you get sick, can't work, or die earlier than expected. Cheerful stuff, I know, but this is grown-up money. And grown-up money includes protection. Because once you have assets, dependents, responsibilities, and momentum, the cost of being underprepared gets much higher. A weak protection setup can undo years of progress. It can turn an already difficult life event into a financial disaster for you or the people who depend on you. This milestone is really about durability. A strong financial life isn't one that only works when everything goes right. It's one that stays functional when life gets messy. That's the standard your 40s should be aiming for, not perfection, Durability. When you've protected what you've built, you stop treating your financial life like a tower of blocks that might fall over if the table shakes. You start turning it into something sturdier than that. Milestone 7. Your money is creating options. This may be the biggest milestone of them all because it is the one people actually feel. A lot of people spend their whole lives thinking the goal is simply to earn more. And yes, income matters. It matters a lot. But by your 40s, the better question becomes, what options has your money created? Can you handle a career transition? Can you leave a bad job without instantly falling apart? Can you reduce your hours if your health changes? Can you help a family member without wrecking your own future? Can you absorb a big expense without spiraling? Can you say no to nonsense? That is what real financial progress starts looking like. Not just bigger numbers, more optionality. And optionality is one of the most underappreciated forms of wealth. It means you are less trapped, less desperate, less dependent on everything going perfectly all the time. You may not be financially free in the dramatic internet sense. You may still work full time. You may still budget. You may still have responsibilities pressing on you from every direction. But if your money has started buying flexibility, that is a major milestone. Because flexibility becomes peace. And peace is a massively underrated financial goal. A lot of people chase visible success while secretly remaining fragile. The better goal in your 40s is to become less fragile. That's what all of these milestones are really building toward. So if we step back, what are the major money milestones to accomplish in your 40s? You have a real emergency fund. You invest seriously and consistently. You are getting rid of toxic debt. You know your net worth and track the trend. Retirement is becoming a plan. You are protecting what you've built. And your money is starting to create options, not just cover bills. Those are the milestones that matter. Not because they sound impressive in a conversation, not because they make you look successful online, but because they make your actual life stronger. That is the mission of your 40s. Turn income into assets. Turn assets into resilience. Turn resilience into options. And turn options into a life with less fear. Because the truth is, your 40s are not too late. They are just less forgiving. That sounds harsh, but it's actually useful. It means the right moves matter more. It means progress becomes more meaningful. It means this decade can produce a level of financial strength that earlier decades were only preparing you for. So if you're behind, don't waste another 5 years feeling bad about it. And if you're doing well, don't get complacent just because the basics are mostly working. This is the decade to tighten things up, to get clearer, to get more intentional, to make sure your financial life is not just surviving, but strengthening. Because once these milestones are in place, money starts doing something much more valuable than just paying for your lifestyle. It starts protecting your future. It starts calming your nervous system. It starts giving you room to think, choose, recover, and breathe. And that is what makes your 40s such a powerful financial decade. Not that everything magically gets easier, but that if you make the right moves now, your life can become much harder to destabilize later.